So, Martin Scorsese, one of the world's, in fact, the world's greatest living filmmaker of all time, has returned with a film, this time on Netflix. Scorsese, a movie on Netflix. Not on the cinema. The Irishman was released last year, was the new film of Martin Scorsese, his 25th film, and it stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci. It's got a terrific cast. It's got Harvey Keitel, Bobby Cannavale, Anna Paquin, Stephen Graham. Literally, it's got all the regular Scorsese people. It's like the Avengers of all the gangsters coming back together in one final show for a Scorsese film. And what did I think of the film? Well, in comparison to Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street and Casino, it's very interesting to see the fact that for the first time in Martin Scorsese's career, he kind of like unglamorizes the gangster genre. Whether or not that actually works is another story. I'll tell you one thing, the strongest point about this film, which is what I'm really pleased about, is the fact, despite the fact this is 3.5 hours long, right? So it's even longer than The Wolf of Wall Street, and that was considered more longer than Casino. It was originally Casino back in '95, which was considered his longest film. Then it was The Wolf of Wall Street, right? This is even longer than that, and it is never, ever, ever boring, right? For that running length of time, right? But is it as good as Goodfellas and Casino and the Departed and The Wolf of Wall Street? Well, overall, I've seen the film twice now to really try to write down the notes of what I think is the reason why it's not. The answer is no, because somehow the way that it's a very morbid film, it's a very drenched in dread kind of movie. Lots of shots of grey, and of course it's a Netflix film, and you can tell it's a Netflix film just by the way. Don't get me wrong, the cinematography in certain cases is absolutely great, but there is a sort of non-cinematic quality in comparison to, say, watching it in the big screen. It would have been better if this movie was presented in cinemas, despite the financial situation that Martin Scorsese was going through at the time of when he was trying to make the movie, which is why it was on Netflix. But I just wish that it was a stronger, longer theatrical release, because it was not released in Brighton, which is absolutely fucking disgraceful, and it was released in London, but it would have to cost a lot of money to go and see it, so which is why I couldn't see it, which is why I had to wait for it to be released on Netflix, which is annoying. But I really wanted to see that film on cinemas, but I just didn't have time to do that because it was miles away from where I was, and that's the reason why I couldn't see the Irishman. However, though, back to what I was talking about its morbidness. I mean, yes, it is true that, like, I see what Martin Scorsese was trying to aim at with this unglamorous lifestyle of the mob, right? But where Goodfellas and Casino and The Wolf of Wall Street had this sort of stronger, because of its, even though they come across as films of glamorizing its storytelling and its genre, the world of crime being sort of like this glamorous world, even though it's not necessarily what the case is all about, because it is not really glamorous, but it comes across as glamorous, right? In this case, even though it's not, he does a good job of not aiming to do that, and it comes across as grey and morbid, somehow, where The Wolf of Wall Street and Goodfellas feel stronger, and even Casino for that matter, have a stronger punch, is, I think, because the way the energy is conveyed in those movies comes across with a stronger emotional connection, not only towards its characters, but Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker's method of editing and direction. Whereas The Irishman, it's just really morbid and sometimes like grey and just makes you feel like, right? It's in a way like, even though it's like a drama and so forth, there's another example I could give, right? Let's say, for example, you see like Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu's first feature, even though you may have not seen it, called Amores Perros. That is a dark, gritty, nitty drama, right? But the visual style of that film is much more cinematic, right? And you feel a sort of emotional connection despite the ugliness that is going on, and that sort of resonates even more so than The Irishman does, right? The Irishman looks like a Netflix film, for one. The second thing is that somehow, where The Wolf of Wall Street has so many, and even The Irishman has memorable scenes, but they don't have a stronger soulful punch where The Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, and Casino, and even The Departed have more so than The Irishman. In a way, I think that The Irishman, despite itself, despite how compelling and how gripping and at times even entertaining, and don't get me wrong, it's like a terrifically performed film. It's terrifically crafted, it's well directed, etc. Somehow it feels just a little bit tired. It felt like a tired film about a subject that has not overly done, but the film feels like it's running out of engine despite being a compelling film. And that's what The Irishman is in my perspective, because it does, even though it has energy to a certain degree, it doesn't have a stronger punch in the gut in comparison to The Wolf of Wall Street or Casino or Goodfellas. There is just something about, even though there's just something about the method of how the story is glamorized with those movies that has a stronger gut punch in comparison to the morbidness that is going on in The Irishman, you see. And that's why those films stand out more so, in my perspective, more than The Irishman did. I'm not saying that the film is overlong, because it isn't. There are certain films that come across as overlong, and they do feel overlong just because of how it is made. But The Irishman is not that sort of film that is overlong despite its running time. Now, going on to the performances, like, again, De Niro is absolutely fantastic in this film. In fact, there are certain scenes that remind me a bit of my grandfather, of how his acting is, because there were certain scenes that remind me literally of my grandfather. I was just like, holy shit. Joe Pesci is back, and what's so great about him is that even despite all these years of him being in semi-retirement from his acting, he's absolutely terrific here. He's not a hothead like, say, Casino or Goodfellas in that manner. He's a much more subtle, more kind of calm, scary, vicious kind of character that he's playing. Pacino is great in this movie too. There's a terrific scene involving De Niro, Pacino, and two other actors. One of them is from Breaking Bad, in which there's a car and it involves fish, and that is just so hilarious and just so tense as well at the same time, which is absolutely terrific. I thought it also stars Stephen Graham, who we all know from This Is England, who's a British actor, but he really nails the sort of American, New Yorkie accent, gangster accent in this movie. Anna Paquin is really good, although, you know, her character I hate, because she's sort of playing a character that the minute she's born, right, she immediately hates her dad. Even though he is a gangster, he has done nothing wrong, and I just have a problem with this immense amount of poisonous loathe that she has towards her flawed father. And yes, this is a story. This is part of the story, but let's put it this way: you know, it's a sort of stereotypical gangster story about a sort of rise and fall, about a man throughout his life, the life of crime, and he has a wife and kids, and one of his kids is played by Anna Paquin, and she's just so like venomously filled with hatred towards her father. Like, she's so quiet, and I just have, to me, in my perspective, is like, what the fuck has Robert De Niro done wrong to you? Do you know what I mean? I get it. His life is not necessarily glamorous or vibrant, or he's living a world of crime. That is something that is not necessarily good for our family, but at least he's trying to support his family in my own perspective. And I don't think her character needs to be that way, basically. I mean, maybe that was what she was in real life, but I'm like, girl, what the fuck is, like, what the fuck? Why are you being such a bitch towards these characters, towards De Niro? Like, you have no reason to be that way because he has done nothing wrong to you in order for you to be that way, you see. And, like, yeah, so there's things like that that not necessarily I didn't like, but I was just like feeling this sense of like frustration and anger towards Anna Paquin's character in the film. Anyhow, altogether, The Irishman is a well-conceived film. It's a beautifully directed movie. I mean, Scorsese's still. What's so great about him is that even in his 70s, he's still making movies that are like this epic and this big, and he keeps going, and that's why he stands out as one of my truly favorite filmmakers of all time. Which is why he's better than Spielberg, because I think like Steven Spielberg, despite him being the absolute legend that Spielberg is, like I'd say about 20% of his movies are forgettable, right? Whereas Scorsese, there's only like 1 or 2 or 3 films that he's made that are forgettable, but all his films pretty much stand out, vividly so and strongly so. The Irishman is a strong, authentic film, just not as good or not as not underwhelming, but just not as strong or has a stronger muscle than its soul hasn't got a stronger muscle than say The Wolf of Wall Street, Casino, Goodfellas, etc. Right, because of its method of craft and atmosphere that doesn't have that stronger gut punch than say the energy of the Goodfellas and Casino, and that is the reason why I'm giving The Irishman a 3.5 out of 5. But if I cannot wait to see what Scorsese has coming next. I hear that he's doing a film with DiCaprio and De Niro combined, which is going to be the absolute like exciting moment of our times coming up. So yeah, if you enjoy my video, please subscribe and put a like, and yeah, have a good one. Ciao, arrivederci.